So our topic for today is going to be engagement timing. Start off with, we'll just define what that is. So engagement timing is how you time your pressure alongside your teammates. So the simple example is like not going in 1 versus 5, or not letting your tank push in while you like sit back and watch Instagram reels. You have to be engaging with your team, but it's a little bit more complicated than that. That's just the simplest is just, no, okay, yeah, sure, I won't go in 1v5. But there's a lot more to it than that. So engagement timing is one of the three pillars of team macro in Overwatch. There are three like key, like big picture things um, in the game, and those three are number one is what, which is what are we going to do? What is the plan? What is the idea? What are we doing? Number two is where. So we know what we're going to do, but where are we going to do it? And then number three, what we're talking about today, is when. Those are the three W's of Overwatch macro. What, where, and when. So what we're talking about today is the when. When are we doing it? And simple answers together. But again, there's more to it than that. All right. Let's first define good engagement timing. What does good engagement timing look like? Good engagement timing is when all 5 players are applying their pressure at the same moment, meaning that this Reaper isn't going to push this flank until the Winston is ready to push and until the Emre is ready to shoot from here. When all the players are ready to engage in whatever way that looks like for them, then they all do it together. That is good engagement timing. Bad engagement timing is if one player goes too early or one player goes too late. So right now, if I jumped in here as Winston, I would be too early because my Emre and my Ana are not ready to engage yet. My Reaper might be ready to engage. Yeah, he's ready to engage. Moira, sure. But if I were to jump in right now, it would be too early. Or on the flip side, is if everyone else was ready and I engaged, and then Ana was still chilling over here, that would be bad engagement timing too, because she was too late. She would need to get set up where she could engage as well with us. So good engagement timing is all the players coming in at the same time. The enemy team can really easily deal with just 1, 2, maybe 3 players engaging at a time, but if it's all 5 players, it becomes really hard. So for example here, if Reaper pushes in right now, and the rest of us don't engage, if it's just Reaper pushing it alone, the enemy team can just turn on him and shoot him and allocate healing to people he's trying to shoot. He won't get anything accomplished. He's going to get his Wraith forced out. He's going to get chased. He's going to get killed. That's just what's going to happen. It's very easy to deal with a single player trying to apply pressure. And if there's 3 players applying pressure, that's a little bit harder. If it's the Reaper pushing here and the Winston coming here and the Moira coming here, that's harder. But if the Emra and the Ana aren't applying pressure, it's still going to be a 5v3 for at least a couple seconds. And those couple seconds are enough advantage to really sway the odds of a fight. And we don't want to give the enemy team those advantages. So we want to make sure that we're all engaging together. So that way it is a 5v5 the entire time. And a lot of times enemy teams won't have good engagement timing. It's a really hard thing to do. It takes a lot of good coordination. So if we're engaging with perfect timing, they probably aren't, which is going to give us a good advantage. And everything becomes easier when you engage with proper timing. Because, like I was saying earlier, if you just engage by yourself, the enemy team can allocate tons of resources to force you out. But if everyone's engaged at the right time, if this Reaper comes over here and he starts shooting this Pharah, well, this Juno's going to have a hard choice. Assuming that our whole team is engaged properly, the Juno could turn to heal the Pharah. But if she does so, she might not have healing to put onto the Kiriko, who's going to get pressured by the Winston and the Moira and the Emre. And so if the Kiriko doesn't get healing, the Kiriko might die. But if the Pharah doesn't get healing, the Pharah might die. And so if we have good engagement timing, it's going to make it so that way the enemy team is going to have to make very difficult choices because they just have too many things to deal with. You just kind of overload the system, and they just don't have enough answers. Um, so that's what good engagement timing looks like. Are there any questions about that before we move on to more of the theory behind stuff? All right. So the next thing is just so we all are on the same page is establishing what the different stages of an engagement are. Um, so there are how many here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different stages of a fight. And so the first one is the pre-fight stage. I'll use this fight as an example. Let's go back in time and we'll use it. So there's
Ready for
pre-fight
battle.
before anything even happens.
Round 1. Capture the
It's right
objective.
now. It's just when players are just basically heading out of the spawn room and running forward. Not even really setting up yet. Nothing is happening right now. This is like pretty much irrelevant at this point. The next stage of the fight is where we start to set up on angles over here, and then also there's usually going to be a little bit of poke going on at this stage too. There's some poke. So there's the pre-fight stage, then there's the poke and setup stage. So at this point, it's long-range heroes taking some shots, not really getting any significant kill pressure, just getting ult charge, and then everyone's setting up on angles, and that's the poke and setup stage. And then once that setup stage is finished, everyone gets up in their positions, which is about now. The next stage is the moment of engagement, which we'll see here. Reaper engages. This is kind of bad engagement time because we aren't all engaging right now, but it's not the end of the world. But that's the moment of engagement, is as soon as one or more players, in a perfect world, all of the players on one team decide to commit to a fight. This Reaper has committed to this fight onto the Pharah. He has engaged. This is the moment of engagement. This can either be done by pushing aggressively, as this Reaper is doing, or for long-range characters, it would be as simple as just peeking the corner. If you're behind the corner, you're not engaged. If you peek the corner, you are engaged now. And then the enemy team is generally going to respond to this by falling back. And so we'll probably see this Pharah fall back, which she does. She falls back. And then as that's happening, our timing here was a little bit off. The rest of our team was not engaging at the same moment. Now we engage and we see they are going to fall back a little bit. So that's the moment of engagement. When someone engages and the enemy team usually responds by falling back. Although sometimes it might only be just for like a split second before they then push back in. But usually the moment of engagement buys a little bit of space for your team. And then the next point, this is the really, really key point of an engagement to understand, is the resistance point. So the enemy team usually falls back, right? But then they re-engage, usually, which is happening right now. So at this point in time, neither team is pushing forward, neither team is falling back. It's come to a standstill, and this is the resistance point. And this is the most important part of a fight to really understand. Because after the resistance point, there's always going to be a breaking point where one team is forced to fall back and one team wins space. And so this is where fights really like where the big advantage in a fight is won or lost. A fight might not be won or lost entirely off of this, but you will win or lose advantage state from this. And so as this resistance point is happening, neither team is pushing forward really. Our team isn't winning space, their team isn't winning space. We're just fighting for control of this spot right here. And then our team breaks. We're forced out. So they have won that engagement. They didn't win the fight, but they won the engagement. So that was the breaking point then, where one team is forced to back up and give up space. And then after that is the chase. And the chase is when the team that lost space breaks and runs away. And then the team that won the space is going to push in to reclaim it. So we see them now pushing in over here to reclaim that space that they lost, or that they won. So those are the steps of an engagement, and this cycle can repeat multiple times during a team fight. So it's probably going to happen again, at least once this fight, because the fight didn't end immediately off of one engagement. Sometimes it will end off of one engagement. Sometimes it'll take 2, 3, 4, even 5 engagements. And the thing is that the enemy team is doing all these steps simultaneously, right? So it's not just us setting up and taking angles and engaging. They're doing it too, and along with that, it's happening on individual angles, sometimes at individual times. So earlier, if we go back in the example, this fight, let's see here. This Reaper, moment of engagement has happened for this Reaper. But for our Emre and our Ana, they're still on the setup and poke phase of the fight. But Reaper's on the moment of engagement. So this angle has moment of engagement. This angle is on setup and poke. This angle is also on setup and poke, about to engage, but still on setup and poke right now. So it's happening on individual angles at individual times. Ideally, in a perfect world, it's all at the same time, but that isn't a perfect world. However, these are not isolated events, right? Even though they might be on isolated locations, they're not isolated events because winning or losing an engagement on one angle, or just, you're not entirely winning or losing engagement, but getting advantage on an angle or getting disadvantage on an angle will affect all of the other angles at the same time because it's either going to demand more resources or free up resources. So this Reaper here, right, we watch this. He's engaging on this Pharah. He's going to push her back, and he's going to demand resources. The supports here are going to peel back for the Pharah. So he has demanded resources, which means that this Ramatra is no longer able to push. He doesn't have a support with him. So even though the Reaper was nowhere near the Ramatra, he has still harmed that Ramatra by demanding resources onto the Pharah. Um, so that's just a really big thing to keep in mind, is that sometimes these events are going to happen all at once as a team, but sometimes they will be isolated instances. But even if it's an isolated instance, it is not truly isolated. A good example that I have in my notes here is, let's say that there's a Cassidy and a Kiriko over here on the left side. I'll get out my pen actually. I'll just draw it here. So let's say that over here on the left side, we have a Cassidy and a Kiriko. And then the enemy team has a Genji over here. And down on main, we have our Reinhardt fighting over here. But our Reinhardt is critical HP, right? He does not have a lot of health. He's getting really hurt. Our Kiriko has a difficult choice to make. Does she stay here and fight the Genji, or does she teleport over to save the Reinhardt? If she were to TP right now and save the Reinhardt, he would live, but the Cassidy might die in his 1v1 with the Genji. If the Kiriko stays, she and the Cassidy will kill the Genji, but then the Reinhardt might die in the process. So even though these are isolated locations, they are not isolated events in regards to how the actual team fight will unfold, because the resources can be demanded across any location, or they can be allocated across any location. So that is really big stuff to keep in mind. Most important thing of all this is just understanding the resistance point and the breaking point, because that is where an engagement is won or lost. Are there any questions about the different stages of an engagement? I know I was yapping for a long time there. Alrighty, looks like no questions. So let's move on to more of the practical stuff, which is how do you have good engagement timing? And so there are 4 steps to this. So step 1 is setting up on an angle and wait for your teammates to be ready. So this is what we were talking about in like the poke and setup phase earlier, is it's where everyone's pushing their own angles and getting ready. So if you're a fast character, you're probably going to get to the angle a lot faster than other people, right? As Winston, I'm going to get here before my Ana is going to get to here. That's just how it's going to be. And so even though in theory I could engage from this position, because I'm still waiting for my Ana, why not just take the opportunity to deepen the angle a little bit? Go over here, maybe go over here. So with fast characters, you can use the fact that your teammates are slow as an opportunity to deepen the angle before the fight starts. So that way, by the time that they are there and you are ready to engage, you're on an even better position. Um, And for slower characters, you don't have much option. You just kind of run over and get set up. You can't really do anything special because you're the one everyone's waiting on. Um, and then the next thing is calming, whether you're ready or not. So once you're ready to engage, you should call that out. Be like, all right, I'm ready. I'm in position, something like that. And then if the rest of your team is ready, maybe call out, "Hey, give me like 5 seconds. I'm almost there." Or especially if they call out, "Are we ready to engage?" Be like, "No, I'm not there." Um, it's just important to make sure that your teammates are aware of your positioning. And another thing is that you can like look at your teammates through the walls and listen for their comms to know whether or not it is the right time to engage. So if you're set up over here and you're ready to jump in as Winston, you can look and see, oh wait, my Ana's too far back. I can't engage yet. Okay, I'll have to wait a second. Um, or the Ana might call out. I'll be ready to engage in 3 seconds. So that's that one step. And then the last step is all five engage at the same time when everyone is ready. And ideally the tank calls this out. This is like one of the big roles of a tank in comms is to call out engagement timing, to call out when we are engaging or when we're falling back. Um, and then every single person engages at the same time from their own angles. So any questions about that as far as how to have good engagement timing from a practical standpoint? Okay. Then we will get into how the different roles are going to do this. So for tanks and close range heroes, they're going to set up on a good angle and then try and run at them when it's time to engage. So the Reaper sets up over here. When the tank calls out it's time to engage, he runs out of the corner and he runs at them. Fairly simple for them. Not anything too complicated. For long range heroes, they probably aren't going to run right at them. That's not really their thing. So their way of engaging is just peeking the corner. With a long range character, once you peek the corner, that is your form of engaging. Um, so something to keep in mind then is that if your team is not ready to engage, you probably shouldn't be peeking your corner, especially if there's more than one person there. If there's just one person, you could maybe get away with it. But if you were to peek this corner, like where there's two people there, and your team wasn't ready to engage, at this point in time, you are overextending. Even though it might not feel like it because you're playing the corner, you're going to take more pressure than you can dish out, so it's not worth doing. And then for supports usually have the easiest job with engagement timing in that they're just going to set up with another teammate on an angle and then push out with them, probably behind them. But how each support's going to do it's a little bit different, right? Lucio might run in with the Genji onto the backline. A Mercy might stay behind cover and pocket the Sojourn. And Ana might peek the corner and throw an anti-grenade. Um, so it's going to be a little bit different for each support, but generally they're going to stay behind a DPS or tank and let them engage first and then follow up right behind them. More so there to support the other player on the angle rather than try and get their own pressure themselves. Although they do of course do their own pressure sometimes. Any questions on how the different roles manage their engagement timing? Okay. Next thing is when should you engage? So having all five players ready doesn't mean that you engage immediately. It just means that you're allowed to engage then. Sometimes you're going to want to wait for an engagement trigger. Could anyone give me a guess of what an engagement trigger might be?
Suzu.
Suzu could be an engagement trigger. If you see a Kiriko use Suzu, that could be a good time to jump in and engage. What other things could be an engagement trigger?
Sleeper anti.
Yeah. So any kind of powerful cooldown could be one. So that's one of the big ones. Is if somebody uses a powerful cooldown like sleep, anti, Suzu, bastion, turret, things like that. But that's not it. What other engagement triggers could there be?
Bad. Someone in a bad position. Someone
Yes.
overextended.
Yes. Positioning mistakes are the biggest engagement trigger, I would say. Um, especially for like the level that we're at, you'll find people making positioning mistakes all the time. And so that could be a really good engagement trigger to follow up on. And then the last one is just if you get a kill. Like I said before, in theory, we aren't peeking any angles or pushing any angles until everyone's ready. But if one player happened to and they got a kill, well, then the rest of the team better engage off of that while they have that huge advantage. So those are all engagement triggers, which unfortunately won't always occur in a fight. especially if you're playing versus a higher level team, they might be coordinated enough and skilled enough as individual players to not be making any of those early fight mistakes to give you guys an engagement trigger. And so it might be tricky. And in those scenarios where you aren't given a trigger, you can still push, right? You don't need an engagement trigger to push. It's just always nicer when you have one. But you aren't going to be able to push as aggressively as you could. If you had a nice engagement trigger, like the Kiriko using the Suzu, well, great. That Kiriko doesn't have Suzu anymore, so you can dive her soldier and she can't save him. So you can be much more aggressive. But if she does have Suzu, and you dive the soldier the same way, well, he gets Suzu'd, and now you're out of your mobility cooldown, and then the whole team turns on you and kills you. So you don't need the trigger to push, but the trigger helps you push more aggressively. So it's always ideal to have it, but it is not a must-have. Any questions on engagement triggers? Alrighty. The next thing is, why does any of this even matter? So I've already said it a little bit, but I'll reiterate on it. If all 5 players are engaging at the same time, the enemy has to deal with 5 players' pressure at once, which is going to be a lot harder than 1 player's pressure at once. Rather than being able to all turn their resources to deal with one threat, right? If they have a threat over, I don't know, a threat over here, and 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 a threat over here, they can't all turn their attention to one of these because then the others would just push in for free. They have to allocate resources in a really difficult way. You create a lose-lose scenario for them where, let's say, this player over here says, I'm going to deal with this one. Okay, that's fine. But then what are you going to do about this one killing you and this one killing you? And if they try to deal with one of the other ones, well, then this one's going to kill them. And so it makes it so that way it is extremely hard for the enemy team to pick a good option because there kind of is no good option. And then if you engage too early, something to keep in mind is that you're putting the burden to carry the team fight on your shoulders if you engage too early. If we go back to this example of this fight earlier here, where Reaper engaged a little bit too early. So Reaper is putting a requirement on himself that he has to win this duel with the Pharah. If he loses this duel with the Pharah, that's bad. If he wins this duel with the Pharah, it's going to be good. But because he's early, he has to win it. He has to win. If he was engaging with proper timing, just a couple seconds later, if he was engaging with proper timing, winning this duel or losing this duel would still matter, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. Whereas right now, if he takes this fight, he gets shot once, he gets his wraith forced out, he goes back here, he's out of the fight for the next 5
Not to flex,
seconds.
but I'm pretty fucking good at being
We lose
emotionally
pretty
stable.
much. But if he comes here and he wins it, well, then that's good. But if he was engaged properly and he wins this, that's great. If he engages this and he loses the duel, he's forced back, it doesn't really matter because the Winston would still be here to finish up the kill. And so that's kind of the difference there, is that if you engage early, you're forcing yourself to have to carry. But if you engage at the right time, you don't have to carry. You can make mistakes, you can lose duels, and still be creating value then. And on the flip side, is that if you engage late, if you're maybe playing a little bit too passive, a little bit too scared, you put the burden to carry on your teammates. Because, let's say, probably realistically right now, our Ana needs to be a little bit more aggressive. She's probably playing a little bit too far back. She needs to be pushing this corner or pushing up here. And by doing that, it makes it so with this Reaper, he has to win this duel now because she's not ready to engage with it. Her value is not being added to the fight yet, which makes, for a moment at least, it a 4v5. And that's going to put the burden to carry on your teammates' shoulders. But if every single player is engaging at the right time, no one has to carry. Everyone just has to do their fair 1/5 of the fight's value. And if they do their fair 1/5, that's all I need to do. So it makes everyone's job easier if we're engaging at the right time. And then last thing, a little note on the end is a question that might be on some people's mind is, what about ult usage? How should I be using my ults? How does that affect engagement timing? And the answer is that that's really complicated. and we will go over that in a different lecture of ultimate timing. But the really, really, really short version of that is that you should use offensive ultimates at the resistant point of the engagement. That's one of the reasons why the resistant point is so important, is because that's when you should be timing your offensive ultimates. And then you should use defensive ultimates in response to enemy aggression, either through ultimates or just through their positioning. Maybe it's after the break. Um, maybe it is at the resistance point. There's a little bit of variety for when you would use defensive ults, but mostly it's in response to enemy aggression. So that is all that I had written here for this lecture. Do we have any questions about anything that we talked about today?
Um, so when you don't have a trigger, is it better is it better to look for something like a important cooldown to initiate off of rather than a trigger then?
So I would say it depends on what your role in the map is. So if you have the point, right? If you own the point and you're setting up for defense, if you don't have an engagement trigger, you don't have to engage. You can just simply choose not to. You can just stand and wait and let the enemy either make a mistake or let them force the engagement, but you don't have to engage. But on the flip side, if you are the attacking team, if you aren't given an engagement trigger, you can't just sit there and wait because you need to get the point. So then you would try and force it anyways and engage without a trigger. But again, just engage less aggressively. Um, but yeah, that's a good question. Any other questions about anything?
I feel like at times I've I've always been the slow one to engage, uh,
Hmm.
especially with like a faster tank like a Winston or something like that. Uh, is that a case where I would communicate like, hey, I need another 2 seconds?
Yes. 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 That is exactly where it is. Like if you're playing Sojourn, like you are just slower than Winston. That's just how it is. So you just need to call out like your timing and letting your Winston know that you're a little bit slower than him and yet you need another 3 seconds to get in position or whatever. And then once you are there, calling out that you are ready to engage. But yeah, that's another good question. Yeah. Anything else? Alrighty. I think that will be good to call it there. Thank you for recording, Cody.